I started by watching other people drive. I then immediately tried to parallel park by participating in a game jam. Somehow made it without totaling my car and others, and then proceeded directly onto the highway, trying to fit as many people as possible into my 2-seater extended bed truck, aka devlogging my dream game. Hi, I'm Sully, and I made a game about my testimony of becoming a believer in Christ. Or at least I sort of made it. Let me explain. It's been a while since I worked on this game, and like I said before, I'm not planning to continue development of this game, but there's still quite a bit I haven't shown you. So here's a brief list of what I did the last 5 weeks of development. I improved the UI of the fishing system. I added a line to trace in the first phase and 3 X's to indicate when you've hit the moss in the second phase. The dialogue script is completely different. It is now a conversation with a coach instead of my parents. I upgraded the system that determines which fish is caught, using terrain painting under the waves. I added a book system, unique fish icons, art, and descriptions. An inventory system with icons for each fish. I made a quest system that tells you what to do next in the game, and after a massive struggle trying to figure out how to save game objects between scenes, I made an ending to the game. Sort of. It'll leave you with probably more questions than answers, but if you're at all interested in the game, it's only about 5 to 10 minutes long and it's free. So check the link in the description. Thanks. So now on to the postmortem. I think I owe you an explanation of why I'm not working on Unworthy anymore, so I'll get into that first. I made the game in a game engine called Unity, an engine that I've been using previously on and off since 2020. And as many of you may know, Unity made a questionable management decision about 7 or 8 months ago, and it left a lot of developers, especially indie developers, wondering if Unity was worth the risk because of their runtime fee. Now, I'm not the best person to explain this situation, so I'll leave some resources in the description if you're at all curious, but basically, in order to continue development of Unworthy, I'd have to either use an engine that I don't really like using anymore, or I'd have to move it to an entirely new engine, which would take a lot of effort and time to have the same level of incompleteness, so it'd be a huge setback. So ultimately, after a long period of uncertainty, I decided to just move on and to take the opportunity to learn a new engine. An engine that's industry standard, that I've been meaning to learn for a while, and as I'm currently applying for jobs, it is by far the most prevalent in the required skills area of the job application. So for the past few months, I've been learning and making little projects in Unreal Engine. So what does this mean for the future? Well, I learned a lot from Unworthy, and I also made a lot of mistakes that I like to avoid. Firstly, I developed the game backwards, for me at least. Just like building a house, you have to create the foundation before you create the rest of the house. And in my experience, you can either choose the story of the game to be the foundation, or the gameplay, like the mechanics. In my game, I decided to make the foundation the story. Now, this is a game about my testimony, but it really is a metaphor. Originally, the game was supposed to be about a chemist who was told to take a break from their work, but because they couldn't handle taking a break, they snuck back into the office and did their work hidden from the rest of the lab. Now, obviously, the game became something very different. It became about a fisherman on the sea somehow, and even from there, I made a lot of changes. But the point is, the foundation of my game was constantly changing. And so while I was making like the windows of the game, I was also, having to deal with this slouching and ever-moving foundation, which made development very tricky. This brings me to my next mistake. I never really decided on a genre. Genre is very important when you're making a game because it's like a template that you can follow. If you're trying to make a single-player first-person shooter, you should probably add enemies and loot to grab and upgrades, because it's very typical of the genre and has worked really well in the past. Obviously, you want to add some uniqueness to your game, but players want something at least a little similar to what they've enjoyed in the past. For my game, I wasn't really focusing on a genre. Instead, I was focusing on a specific game, and you probably know that game is Dredge. And as I kind of made the game further, I realized that I was just kind of mimicking that game and making all the same similar mechanics. And so it became difficult for me to differentiate the game, and I found myself kind of making things that are disappointingly similar to Dredge. The next thing is that I made devlogs too early in the process. Let me explain this with another analogy. When I learned how to drive, I studied enough to pass a basic test. I then drove with my parents in a controlled, safe environment, an empty parking lot, until I learned the ropes. The way that I learned game development was actually quite different. I started by watching other people drive. I then immediately tried to parallel park by participating in a game jam, somehow made it without totaling my car and others, and then proceeded directly onto the highway, trying to fit as many people as possible into my 2-seater extended bed truck, aka devlogging my dream game. Now, I'm not saying game jams or devlogs are bad, but I think by delaying devlogs a little bit, then I can really nail down the foundation of my game and experiment with ideas more without feeling like I need something to show you. This forced me into committing to things that I wasn't certain would work. So that brings me to the final question that I aim to answer in this video. What am I making now? To be honest, I'm not entirely sure. Everything kind of sounds risky at this point. I could try to make an entire game this time, but that would take a lot of time, and I'm not really good at making small games. I could take the advice that I got at GDC when I got my portfolio reviewed and just make a bunch of systems and mechanics, because those are the jobs that I'm applying for. While this has a quicker turnaround, it really only helps me so much when trying to get a game development job. And even if it does improve my portfolio, it just is so hard to get into the industry. So I've decided I'm just gonna try one out and adjust if necessary. Making systems seems the least risky, and I think I have a way to make it really fun, and so I'll share my plans about that sometime soon in the future. So in summary, I learned a lot while making Unworthy, but I also made a lot of mistakes that I'd like to avoid in my next game, whenever that may be. What I'd like to emphasize for this next season of development is to fail fast so I can learn fast. Until then, I'll see you in another video soon. Thanks for watching.